Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development and Architecture Podcast. We have Prasanna Veeraswamy here. This is podcast number 4 in the Prasanna series. If you haven't watched the other three, I highly recommend you do so. Definitely the third one to get context to this fourth one. I want to extend a warm welcome to Prasanna to this fourth podcast for taking time and sharing Prasanna's travels around the world. To 200 countries. Like I've said in the previous introductions, Prasanna was born and raised in Chennai in India, and he lived in the US and a number of other countries, including Denmark, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, and China. He has a lot of experience simply by virtue of making these travels happen. And I don't know anybody else who's actually done this. So we've been having some really exciting conversations that tie into cultures, people, communities, and businesses, of course, right? So definitely check out all of our podcasts, the previous ones and the ones to come in future as well. Prasanna, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to continuing the Africa topic.
Perfect, right? In the last one, I know Prasanna had to, we just started off the topic, but we had to, pick this up in the fourth one because, we had to charge our machines and stuff. So the thing I had mentioned was a hypothetical scenario where somebody, let's pretend that you hadn't done these travels, you're living in India, uh, you've only been, like, let's say you've not done much travel or if any. I've lived in the US, not done much travel as presumptuous here, right? And then we go to Africa, we meet with somebody in Sierra Leone. We are three of us, similar, say, demographic, and we are having conversations. My question to you was, given the fact that the cultures are different in terms of exposure to technology and how much time you spend on YouTube and other things, which is much lower in Africa compared to every other country. India is number one in consumption. I think US is 3 or 4, if I'm not wrong, and Africa is one of the lowest, below 30% in terms of YouTube consumption. So that's where we left off the previous podcast. And I know we have like 20 minutes. We're going to continue. I don't think we can cover 54 countries in Africa in 20 minutes. There's no way. So I reckon it's going to be, we're going to have more podcasts to cover this topic of Africa as a continent. But in the 20 minutes, I want to give you that hypothetical scenario and have your thoughts on who do you think, we're going to trivialize this, not talk purchase power parities and GDPs, just making things conveniently simple. Who would be the happier person in your mind and why so?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll take a step back, right? And I'll start thinking about, I explained in the previous podcast why Africa reminds me so much of India back in the 80s and 90s. It's still raw, for lack of a better word, but still kind of in a very different era, right? And that keep that in your mind and now come to the point where we live in a world, rest of the continents have gone so forward and people have evolved. We talk about millennials and Gen Z, and everybody wants instant gratification, right? When you say you want everything done now, right? I don't have, we live in a world of TLDR. I don't even want to read one paragraph. Can you just summarize in a line, right? So even a movie, they want to compress a movie into, make the whole Breaking Bad is now in 3 hours in one of those formats, right? So when you take that and compare to what I said, so Africa, most of sub-Saharan Africa, people live in a world where, things happen and we're going to let it happen and we're going to just follow that, right? So given that, I'll give a realistic scenario as compared to your three people who will be more happy, right? We were traveling from Gambia. Actually, it's called the Gambia, I think, the only country that has an article in front of it. Yeah, the Gambia to Senegal, and it was like a very long road trip, and we got stuck in one of those crossings, like where in every other country probably you expected when is the next ferry for the crossing, or what time is it, or what's the ETA, oh this is delayed, what's the next one, right? And this driver parks the car, and we suddenly look out and see there are like 50 other cars in front of us, and there's no ferry, right? And we ask the person, okay, what about the ferry? And this African driver is like, yeah, ferry coming, right? And we are like from the US, any Western world, like, yeah, what okay, give me an ETA so I can prepare. No, it will come when it comes, right? So you have to resign to the fact that, okay, clearly there is no schedule, right? You chill. And then What about my 4G, 5G? Nothing. That's not even a 2G there, right? There's no cell phone signal, and of course there's no hotspot when we went. There's no Wi-Fi connectivity, and now you are in a place. That's when we started realizing, oh God, without being connected and without having a kind of a predictability of when something's going to happen, my wife and I were getting paranoid. And which is like half an hour became 1 hour, became 2 hours, 3 hours. Eventually, it took 4 hours plus for us to even move to the head of the queue, right? And then yeah, it took 5 plus hours to get out of that port, if we may call it a port, right? So what bothered us was that's when you realize, oh God, we got so caught on with what the online stuff for the technology and everything. Back in Krish might realize back in the 90s, we studied in the same university. There's nothing called internet. There's nothing called a mobile phone. So all we had to do was go to this common place called Sky. It's a launch or some other park and just hang out talking to each other, right? And we were happy. And I hope you are happy
Right.
too. It's like without any of the stuff that exists today, right?
But for the
You talk,
grades, other than the grades, I was
yeah,
happy for about other
yeah,
things. Okay.
other than the grades, yeah. So, like you said, you're talking about YouTube. I'm talking about there is not even an internet super highway as they used to call it, right? And still, without any entertainment, we're having fun. Africa felt like that. Everybody around us, like probably there were some 200 people, nobody seemed to bother. They were like, yeah, he's coming. And like after 5 hours, we were the only ones who felt exhausted, tired, as if we lost our lives and we lost 5 hours, right? There's nothing. And we're on a vacation and we're going to the next port. So why I'm saying the long story is now if you take that same example to the scenario we gave, 100%, every the person from anywhere in Africa will be happy, but they're going to find the next person and start having a conversation and talk about life, right? Where you and I might be, oh, what happened to this code? Like, what happened to this mail I didn't send? We are so plugged in. We are practically become like the Matrix, right? We don't know who's controlling us. So yeah, absolutely. That's what we love about Africa and people in Africans, right? Why I said that in the previous episode, I'm going to get into something a little bit more personal and probably sensitive is it's not just Africa, the continent. Since we travel to every country in the world, we've seen Africans, the race, in every other place. We've seen them in the Caribbean. We've seen them in South America. We've seen them in North Africa. We've seen them in Middle East. But yeah, people who migrated, settled for a few generations, or just migrated recently, right? It is the tendency. It is a tendency in them to live life in a very relaxed way. That is an African way. For them, it's the ocean, it's the breeze, it's the weather. They don't think too much, right? And that's why if you follow cricket, or if you know about the West Indies, there is something about the
You know what? I was going
Caribbean.
to interrupt you there. Sorry. Let me. You literally took the words out of my mouth there. I'm just going to, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to add to it because I can totally feel it because I used to go to school with somebody called Marcella.
Uh-huh.
She was many years older than I when I was actually going to school in Houston. Again, if you're watching it from, let's say, other parts of the world by school, I mean, college, right? So at University of Houston. Marcella and I know Joanna, who was from Ghana, right? So the three of us actually did a few things together, and I cherish those moments because Marcella was a teacher in Jamaica, and she'd come over to do the masters and then go back, right? To go back to teaching. Every time I had a conversation with a person, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. It was like, sometimes, you go to a place of worship for people who are religious and
Mhm.
pious. If you are, great. If you're not, that's fine too. I mean, I haven't been to a temple in a long time, but, the idea is to get that sense of comfort and peace and
Mhm.
serenity, right? I actually got a lot of it just talking to Marcella, right? Just talking to her. Even
Mhm.
doing a project, doing an assignment as a member of the group, it gave me a sense of calm. And if you actually have to quantify it, if you did an analysis, I don't know where it would be awesome because sure, she want to get good grades as well, right? Much like everybody, not that I got any better grades, but the approach and the attitude towards life in general was remarkably different. And I took, compared that to, watching cricket, West Indies playing in West Indies. I used to watch like club cricket played in the Caribbean when I was back in India. because it was very cool. People used to play the music and drums,
Yeah,
and everyone's having a good time. So sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say that I couldn't agree more with that, but please
yeah.
continue with your
Yeah,
thoughts.
that's why I want to say people don't understand. It's the same thing everywhere. It's the African race. I don't want to just put it to the continent. And they're free spirits, like the Hakuna Matata. It's cliched and overused now, but it is the life. They don't think too much, and that is fantastic. And that's why I think why I wanted to say that sensitive thing was we were in Ghana, and we saw in Sierra Leone and other places. There are these very they call attractions and points of interest, historical attractions. And when you go there, it breaks your heart. Like when you see that place, the port they departed from, when the slaves were taken and brought into Europe and America. It's funny, like, I'm talking about a race and a culture who lived life freely, right? Roaming, singing, and dancing. And the last set of people who wanted to work, right? And it, actually, it impacts it. So that's why Africa is where Africa is, the Caribbean is where they are, right? Only the outsiders have come in and taken over. They're running the business because they don't want to do this, right? They want to live life free. And you take them, and that's the biggest injustice, right? And you make them do all the hard work, whether it's the plantations in the Caribbean or whatever in other parts, right? So it breaks your heart. I mean, you could have picked so many people who love to work, like the Indian people, right? But you pick the people who don't want to work and relax. So yeah, it still persists. If you go to so many of these places, our
Just
observation.
to clarify, you're not saying you don't want to pick anybody. Just to, I'm just going to state the obvious, right? When you say pick anybody, not in that context, but you're just saying that it's just even more sad is what you're trying to say there, right?
Yeah,
Just
no, no, not pick anybody. I'm just talking about these are people willing. If you go to the West Indies, if you go to Fiji, if you go to so many places in Malaysia and East Africa, there are tons of fifth, sixth generation Indian families that are living there. These are people
mm,
who migrated. They were willing to work. They're willing to be put into train, live in very poor conditions. They wanted to make the money, wanted a better life. And they've been there for like hundreds of years. You go to Seychelles, Mauritius. So these are what I'm trying to say is that yeah, nobody should be troubled. But there are people who are willing to work, right? The same thing
mm.
happens in everywhere. If you go to Singapore, if you come into southern India, there are workers who are meant to, okay, we want to build this and we don't mind getting paid. We like doing this. As opposed to there are certain people who don't want to work. They don't want to be. That's why you're talking about 5G going into or the next generation of cell phone network. And they're like, we don't even consume YouTube. We don't care, right? I'm talking about that's what
No,
I
no,
meant. Yeah.
absolutely. No, but Prison,
Yes.
let me ask you this, right? In the last one you mentioned, so I was wrong in my assumption because I thought, when you have a large continent, you have lots of space, right? Plenty of land, very few people. My assumption was things were going to be dramatically different, but you mentioned that actually there's a lot of commonalities between folks in different parts of Africa, and that, to be honest with you, comes as a surprise to me. Is
Yeah.
there a particular design pattern or a commonality that you found? Like, I mean,
Okay. It's very hard to explain. So let me put you uh, turn the table and ask you the question, right? I strongly disagree India as a country, right? Because what defines that I written in my book, right? What is the country? Who draws the borders and everything? It's a controversial thing because India is so diverse. Every state, you can take Gujarat, and that could be as diverse as Portugal from Germany when you compare Gujarat to Tamil Nadu, right? But it's a union, right? But that's how Africa is probably actually not even that much diversity. But if I ask you to think, don't you think there is something that connects? I'm not saying monolithic, but people from India for most parts,
oh,
right?
you know what? Absolutely. I can give
That,
you,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
that I think you said it beautifully, right? Because actually, my wife and I have had these conversations not too long ago. Because let's say you take movies, right? India
Mhm.
produces a lot of movies for people who haven't watched it. And it's not Bollywood
Yeah.
alone, because I don't watch Bollywood movies. I watch movies that are made in the part of the world that I
So
grew up in. For instance, it's a large industry, right? So India's got, even though Bollywood is a popular enough industry that everybody recognizes it, it's just one of the type of movies made in India in one particular language. There's movies made, the same number of movies are made in other languages as well, like Tamil and Telugu and plenty of other languages. Even though, let's say you take people in Kashmir watching a Hindi movie, for instance, right? People in Punjab, and go all the way down south, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, for instance. while the languages are different, the food is different, the cultures
Yeah,
are different, our weddings are different, even within the same religions, the weddings are
yeah.
dramatically
Clothes, yeah.
different. There is a binding factor, right? There
Yeah.
is certainly strong family oriented binding factor. Even the
Yeah.
movies are similar, right? In other
Similar.
words,
Yeah.
it's different, yet there are so many
Yeah.
similarities between those movies,
Exactly. I would go as far as saying the subcontinent. Since visited all the countries
right?
there, I would put Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, everything put together, Sri Lanka. Yeah, they're different, but so that's how I feel about Africa, where they might not speak the same language, but the spirit, like you said, like what I spoke
Right.
previously, the spirit is what binds them together. They're very warm, they're welcoming, and they don't like to force themselves to over accomplish or achieve. They're happy with what they are, right? They want to do more. So that cuts across most of
So
the
two,
most of
so
the
one, so I know this is a broader conversation. I'm respecting your time. We have 7 minutes more. Let me ask you this:
Mhm,
if we put technology in the hands of everybody, you're talking about there, right? The three of us went there. We met in Sierra Leone. We are having
mhm,
this time together, hanging out, right? Three strangers. What if I reverse the table, and said, you know what? I'm going to get rid of my machines and laptop and phones and mic and everything that has remotely relates to a device, and give that person all of this access. They're not going to relocate. They're going to live in Africa, in
mhm,
Sierra Leone for the next 1 year. But they're going to have all of these devices, all of the
mhm.
connectivity, right?
Yeah.
The same people. You think, what is your take on, with your travel experience? Is that technology stronger than people? It is going to change the
Now,
people?
my with the confidence I can see, that's why businesses are dreading to get in there. The Ubers or the Airbnbs and all the because if you talk about New York or even in India, the apps. I'll give you specific examples like quick commerce. It's becoming big, right? Whether it's a Blinkit, Zepto, Flink, whatever you want to call it, Swiggy. No, they're not going to say, "Hey, press something in few minutes." This happened in one of the podcasts. This guy's sitting in New York, crunching his code, and then he gets his flavored yogurt within 5 minutes at his doorstep without having to step out. Ain't happening in Africa, right? You can give him the technology, for him it's like old India. He wants to go to his grocery store, chat with the guy, what's happening in life, do something, pack everything, touch and feel his onion. They won't change because they're refusing to get onto this next wave, right? Which is what I mentioned. They're frozen in time, and you can squeeze as much technology. They'll adapt it only in their own speed. It's not like because they still believe in things are working. Why would I want technology to support and make it better, right?
So
So
there is much to learn in terms of, when you're talking travel, right? Sometimes, I think you're talking, you know I'm not saying there's beautiful locations and locales and beaches everywhere. Some countries don't present themselves that way, but based on what you're telling me, to me this sounds a lot more relaxing, right? Sometimes you take a 4 week vacation back home. I see people come back even more exhausted because
yeah,
they've done so much travel back in India and had to meet like 100 families and relatives. They're like, I need a break after a vacation after I come back, right?
yeah,
In that context,
yeah.
go ahead.
I want to say this one thing. So it depends on who you are. If you're the outsider, if you're going on a vacation to chill, is fantastic. You feel like back, right? But I don't know if I can use the word. But as a visitor, you feel crippled because today, anywhere you go, like if I go to Europe, I can give an example. There is this a platform called Get Transfer. All I have to do is I'm going from Como to go to Milan. That's it. I pop it, and like it's a bidding system. A lot of different taxi drivers start saying 50 euros, 40 euros, and I can pick 25 euros. Super cool. Back in the day, I had to write a mail to 50 people, read all the mails, like Savari in India, right? Savari is an app for those
Right.
who don't know. You can put a from and to, and people bid, and you can pick the best one. Go into Africa. Nothing happens. You go to your corner tour operator. I want to go from here to there. So your logistics and planning, because we got so hooked onto technology today. Now you come out of the airport, like, wow, I got to talk to this guy now, and I have to bargain with him. So that's what I meant. Takes you back to the 80s and 90s, which is a bit of a nightmare. But from your perspective, absolutely. Once when you got that sorted, it's really unwinding. You're really chilling out. That's a real vacation, right? You sit in a yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I think so. To wrap this up, right, and then pick up from the next one, I still want to continue this conversation because I have more questions, and I might respectfully disagree without anything to back my disagreement, which is, I still feel like if I gave the device and the 1 Gbps internet connectivity and a Vision Pro that's showing up apparently tomorrow at the Apple stores, or maybe it's pre-ordered tomorrow, I take all of these devices and
Hello.
dump it, give it to somebody and say you got to use this thing for like a whole year. You're saying, Prasanna, that will not make that
Chris, I
impact to
can't
the
hear
point
you.
where
You're
that
frozen.
person becomes like you or I, for instance, right? That they will still be able to maintain their core beliefs, correct? Oops, did I lose you? Hey folks, we might have lost our guest there. Might have run out of charge, I think. So what we will do, we'll actually pick this conversation up in the next podcast. My apologies. So we were talking about just Africa as a continent. Talked about Prasanna's travels. I guess his travels. He's been to every country in Africa. I think he mentioned 54 countries there. And we were talking about the differences and similarities between folks who actually live in different countries in Africa. What we'll do in the next podcast is literally pick up from where we left off there. My question was, what if in my hypothetical scenario, where we actually took, Prasanna, and we met somebody, a friend of ours in Sierra Leone, and had that person who did not have exposure to all of these devices and equipment and the internet connectivity to the levels we are actually used to. What if we actually presented that person with those equipments and technologies and sort of quote unquote force them to use it for a year? Would they end up starting to think much like we do, just because we have this common factor of technology and how invasive that could possibly be? That was my question. I think Prasanna's point was it may not make the difference, and I was saying I was going to sort of respectfully disagree and make it difficult and say that maybe that will make a difference, because that's kind of how I think I was or we were many years ago. And technologies have made their impact, fortunately or unfortunately. But we will literally pick up from that point onwards in the fifth podcast, right? So we're going to talk more about Africa and Prasanna's travels to Africa as a continent and different countries in Africa in podcast number 5 of N. But thanks for watching. We're going to keep this interesting conversation going. Talk to you soon.